What the hell is going on?
A Qantas A330 takes a sudden nosedive over the Indian Ocean.
And then, boom. I must have hit the ceiling because it knocked me out.
119 passengers and crew are injured.
Mayday, 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 Qantas 72.
The pilots struggle to control their crippled aircraft.
We are in trouble. I don't know why the plane is behaving as it is.
Auto brakes not working, spoilers not working, computer one's not working.
There are no procedures in our operating manuals for what we are dealing with. We probably will not survive.
Qantas Airways Flight 72 cruises above the Indian Ocean, headed for Western Australia.
Look at that, you're Somalia in the sky. How's everybody doing? You good?
In the rear of the cabin, flight attendant Fuzzy Maiava is just finishing meal service.
I wanted to travel the world for free. I wanted to see the sights and, you know, the great cities. And I thought, well, the only way to do that is to become a flight attendant.
Now this is one of my favorites.
I just thoroughly enjoyed doing it. Yeah, I just wanted to get out and show my flair, I guess, you know, and yeah, and just make people smile and be happy, you know.
Girls?
Today, Fuzzy's been asked to keep a close eye on two young sisters traveling without their parents.
I got a call from my manager. He said, okay, Fuzzy, I'm gonna put these lovely girls into your care. Could you take care of them? Because, you know, you're a father, you're a grandfather.
And for my special guest, our finest juice. Now, don't forget, girls, keep those seatbelts on, all right?
I explained to them that, you know, your seatbelts must be on at all times, unless you want to go to the bathroom.
The plane is an Airbus A330, a twin jet with the latest in aviation technology on board.
The A330 is a new generation fly-by-wire aircraft. It's highly automated, and the advantages are easy to fly, easy to manage, and protected.
Flight 72 departed from Singapore. The flight path covers almost 2,500 miles across the southern Indian Ocean to Perth, Australia.
All right, Ross, out of my way.
Captain's back in action.
Captain Kevin Sullivan is a former Top Gun fighter pilot with the U.S. Navy.
The flight was a long tour of duty day, so the three of us will take scheduled rest breaks.
Gonna make a quick laboratory run?
Go ahead.
Ross Hales is the second officer.
The second officer was from General Aviation, had been in the company for 12 months, a very competent young pilot.
First Officer Peter Lipset is the next pilot scheduled to go on break.
So, Peter, what's the update?
We're 100 nautical miles from the coast. Learmouth is to our left, and still cruising at 37,000 feet.
All right. Have a good rest.
The first officer was a former Royal Australian Navy helicopter pilot, very competent and experienced pilot.
There are 303 passengers and 9 flight attendants on board. Perfect weather is making for a comfortable flight.
We're over the ocean, and things were very smooth.
Any changes?
Altitude and airspeed's the same. Smooth sailing. Now, don't tell me I just jinxed us.
The captain notices his autopilot is no longer engaged.
Autopilot 1 disconnects, and now I'm hand flying. It's a bit annoying, but we have two systems.
Engaging autopilot 2.
I engaged autopilot 2, and no sooner had I done that than we started getting overspeed and stall warnings.
ECAM showing a lot of errors.
Overspeed warning. How can we be in a stall and overspeed at the same time?
We can't.
In the cabin, there is no sign of trouble at all. But a growing list of errors and warnings is filling the pilot's cockpit display.
Navire 1 fault.
That's not right.
They don't understand why.
Airspeed's unreliable. Disconnecting autopilot.
That's the first phase of unreliable speed memory checklist. Autopilot off. I'm hand flying now, manually flying.
Better get Peter back in here.
Can the FO return to the cockpit, please?
My thinking is all hands on deck. This is going to be a complex scenario to work through, and I wanted the first officer back on the flight deck to assist us.
Flight attendant Fuzzy Maiyava finally has a moment to grab a bite to eat.
I went at the back and I put my meal in the oven to warm it up.
Hey, Fuzz. Where's your wine?
Ours seems to have evaporated.
Come on, you should know where it is. Help yourself.
Thanks, pal.
Diane and Peter are a couple who both work for Qantas. Today, they're off duty.
They were celebrating because they were on holiday. And I'm looking at my oven because I'm hungry. I'm focused on the food, you know. As I focused properly on the timer, 13 seconds. 13 seconds was the actual time. All I could see was the floor disappearing, like away from my feet. We were going up.
Sudden G-forces pull passengers up from their seats. Anyone not strapped in hits the cabin ceiling.
And it went bang. I must have hit the ceiling because it knocked me out. You know, I'm not sure how long it was for, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, 10. I just wasn't sure.
The G-force was enough, even with our 3-point harness, to lift us both out of the seat and push us forward as well. That's quite disorienting.
Flight 72 is suddenly in a dangerous nosedive. Captain Sullivan grabs the side stick to try to level his plane. It doesn't respond.
Once I pulled back on the stick and nothing happened, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not in control of this plane. I basically had to brace myself with my right hand as I pulled back with the left.
The captain releases the side stick with his plane still speeding downward.
I'm confused. Why is it doing this? Because it's not me doing it, it's the aircraft doing it.
Then he tries it again. This time it responds. The plane starts to level off.
I knew as soon as the positive G came on, people would come down from the ceiling.
And, you know, I landed on the floor on my knees. I just felt this crunch, and it's sort of like it's just been KO'd, you know, hit by a bus or something. It was so hard.
What the hell was that?
It's a prim.
Captain Sullivan knows his primary flight computer has gone haywire.
The primary flight control computer is the brains of the airplane. It moves the controls for the pilot.
Attention passengers, this is the flight deck. All passengers and crew must be seated and fasten their seatbelts immediately.
Fuzzy is badly injured. He fears his friends Diane and Peter may be in even worse shape.
As I came to again, I saw Diane and Peter on the floor. And Peter, I couldn't help but see blood gushing out of his head. The oxygen masks were dangling down, you know, were just swaying. I thought, something's happened, something's wrong, something's really, really wrong.
Navire 1 fault. Resolved.
What's next?
Prim 3 fault.
The pilots struggle to resolve the cascade of warnings on their screen.
Navire 1 fault again.
What the hell is going on?
We couldn't get Peter up. You know, he was still in and out of consciousness, you know. Then he managed to sort of like put his hand up on the rail. And then next minute, it did it again.
I remember that big fat wing roaring through the air mass. Again, my control input is locked out. Again, we have to brace ourselves against the force. And of course, the view of the Indian Ocean. There was a flash in my consciousness to say, are you going to wind up there today?
Things were flying around again. Our legs were dangling in the air, but we managed to hold onto the rail.
Once again, the captain's controls are slow to respond. Finally, he manages to return his plane to level flight.
I looked back up and I could see the two sisters who were at the back, especially when I was sitting on the aisle. She was looking at me and screaming, and she was like more or less pointing to me or putting her hand out, you know, to reach out to me. But I couldn't move. I felt so useless because they were my responsibility. So I took it to heart because I have children too.
Attention passengers, this is the captain speaking. We are dealing with flight control problems. Everyone is to remain seated with their seatbelts fastened.
After the second pitch down, I'm starting to get a bit cranky. I don't know why the plane is behaving as it is. My inputs aren't stopping this behavior.
It's carnage out there. I broke my nose.
Congratulations. Sit down, strap in. We're in trouble.
I've never used those words in my whole flying career. But that day, we were in trouble.
Normally, pilots fly with just a seatbelt around their laps. But the unpredictable situation now calls for the full 5-point seatbelt harness.
I sort of turned to Diane, and when Diane looked at me, and I thought, we're finished. I was more or less praying for it to happen quick.
Do we need to divert?
Probably our best option. We might not make it to Perth. We could pitch down again at any time.
Learmonth is close. Its runways can handle an A330.
Let's get an injury report from the cabin.
Flight 72 was almost 1,000 kilometers from its destination. The captain wants to know how his passengers are faring after the sudden, violent upsets.
Okay, thanks. We have broken bones, at least one broken leg, lacerations.
Okay, good enough. We're declaring a mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Qantas 72, diverting direct to Learmonth.
Qantas 72, roger. Cleared to Learmonth. The information we got was that it was an emergency and there's going to be emergency landing.
Sergeant Richard Leonard of the Western Australian Police Force is among the first to learn about Flight 72's emergency.
We had some distance to cover. It was important we got there quick as possible.
Pull out the charts on Learmouth and give us an approach briefing. This is the captain speaking. We are aware of the injuries and are diverting to Learmouth, where medical assistance will be waiting.
And I thought to myself, okay, we've heard from the front. We've got an action plan, so we've got time to secure ourselves. But Diane, amazing woman, strong, focused. It's that extra strength that you don't know you have. You know, that was Diane.
Ross, I need the approach for Learmouth.
I'm trying, but the computer's not letting me enter anything.
We tried to interact with our navigation computers. They were not cooperating.
Okay, fine. We're doing a visual approach and a 10-mile final.
As the pilots prepare for an uncertain approach into Learmonth, emergency personnel prepare for the potential disaster to come.
When I first arrived at the scene, some of the medical services had already arrived. Nurses from the hospitals were teaming up with ambulance volunteers. So we knew it was going to be an urgent situation.
Auto brakes not working. Spoilers not working. Computer 1's not working.
With so many error messages, the pilots don't know which systems they can rely on during the landing attempt.
At that stage, I'm thinking, okay, what's working? I'm still flying. We still had engines. And that's good enough, at least for us to get over to Learmonth.
So we don't have much, but we do have engines. Any questions? Looks like I picked a bad day to give up sniffing glue.
I used the line from the airplane movie. Brings the stress level down.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Qantas Flight 72 begins its final descent to Learmonth. Sullivan can only hope his plane will respond properly and not drop again.
That is my biggest threat. We're in a badly degraded airplane. We're still getting stall and overspeed warnings. And now we start getting master caution chimes. There are no procedures in our operating manuals for what we are dealing with. And we'll have to gather further information to see exactly what else is not working.
Flaps 2?
At 11,000 feet, the captain does an early control check to determine if at least his flaps are working.
We extended the flaps to position 2, slowed the speed down to that flap limit speed. We'll do a few turns, see if it works. Turn left, turn right. Feels okay. That's good enough for me.
All right. Let's go.
Passengers can do nothing but pray they make it safely to the runway. For the pilots of Qantas Flight 72, tensions rise as they bring their crippled A330 in for an emergency landing.
Altitude's decreasing. Anticipation is increasing. It's quite a tense period because we're approaching a point where any pilot response to a pitch down is not going to have any effect. If something does happen close to the ground, we probably will not survive.
The former fighter pilot decides that the situation calls for an extreme technique.
Here we go.
Something he learned in the Navy.
We have a maneuver called a precautionary emergency landing. It's a high energy, high rated descent approach.
The A330 no longer has enough altitude to recover from a dive at normal landing speed. But at a higher speed, it may be able to generate enough lift to recover if trouble strikes again.
If I have energy in the form of speed, I have maneuvering potential to bring the nose up above the horizon before the airplane does another pitch down.
The military maneuver quickly brings them to within striking distance of the runway.
Gear down.
Gear down.
Flaps 3.
The runway is long enough for an A330 in perfect working order. But with so many systems in doubt, will Flight 72 be able to stop in time?
The automation was our worst enemy on that day. We're trying to manage that kind of distraction. What's real, what's not real. But as soon as the wheels touched down, everybody in the cabin was cheering.
The brakes work, and the pilots are able to slow the plane down.
But we're at Learmonth Airport. There's not much assistance, and it's going to be a long day.
The doors flung wide open. It was the first responders.
When I entered the plane at the rear, it was quite clear where the significant trauma had occurred.
To see the panels dislodged, the blooded bandages, my heart was breaking, and it was broken that day.
A standout memory for me would have to be the two sisters. I was really glad that they were okay, that no harm came to them. I could take that and say to myself that, Fuzzy, you did your job.
In the cockpit, the first officer gathers up page after page of the plane's post-flight report.
We all had a look. The first thing was 10 simultaneous failures at the same time marker.
Well, there's the problem.
I looked at the two other pilots and I said, I think we're pretty lucky to be here because it was a total systems failure.
Medical responders get injured passengers off the plane. Amazingly, everyone survives. But many are seriously injured, including Fuzzy.
It's been a really rough time since the accident. I've been in and out of hospitals.
Fuzzy sustained injuries to his head, knees, back, and shoulder. The physical pain and emotional scars from the accident linger.
When the pain comes on, it always triggers the flashbacks and the nightmares. The pain that I'm experiencing every day, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Investigators from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau arrive in Learmonth.
In the cabin, there was quite a lot of damage, mainly to the ceiling panels and the ceiling fixtures. You could see people had actually hit the ceiling, and that would have resulted in severe injuries.
With almost 600 A330s in service around the globe, investigators face intense pressure to find the cause. Could this happen to another A330?
It was quite important to understand as quickly as possible what triggered this or what were the factors involved in this so we could stop it happening again.
Let's power this thing up and see if we can download some data.
Investigators hope data from the plane's quick access recorder can shed light on what went wrong. They focus on the fly-by-wire control system.
fly-by-wire system takes the pilot's inputs and converts them into electrical signals that go out to the wings and the tail of the aircraft to control the flight control surfaces.
I'm seeing 2 abrupt changes in the elevator's position at cruise. Looks like that's what caused the pitch downs.
Were those commands coming from the pilots?
Oh, they weren't.
Weird.
Navire 1 fault.
That's not right.
It seems the plane's fly-by-wire system was sending rogue commands to the flight control surfaces.
What the hell is going on?
Baffled by their discovery, investigators test the system.
So we need to look at the elevators and the servo controls themselves.
All right, let's move the elevators and see how they respond.
Copy that. Moving elevators down.
We did functional tests on the elevators themselves and stood up and watched them move up and down.
Moving elevators up.
Okay, that's good. Everything's working back here.
The test reveals no problems at all with the flight controls. Whatever the malfunction was that imperiled Flight 72, it seems to have mysteriously vanished.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Investigators need to hear the pilot's story.
That was some amazing flying.
I appreciate the kudos, but to be frank, I just want to find out what happened.
We're working on that.
We went through everything that they recalled and anything unusual in the period beforehand.
Describe the flight leading up to the pitch downs. Anything that could have caused these erratic movements.
Everything was perfectly normal, from Singapore to most of the way across the ocean. We were totally blindsided.
They had a pretty good recollection, but had no explanations as to why this happened.
And you were getting a lot of faults.
Oh, yeah. There were a few. Have a look for yourself. It's like the plane had a mind of its own.
The A330's post-flight report logs all of the cautions and warnings that were affecting the plane.
On the post-flight report, there was a large list of different warnings.
Pull it up, please.
Some of them seem to be from completely unrelated systems. It raised a lot more questions than answers initially.
They study the list, looking for anything that might connect the various warnings.
The first question you have is, what's the common element between all these?
All these errors are connected to Ataru 1.
The Ataru, or Air Data Inertial Reference Unit, relays important information to the flight computers about the environment outside the plane.
This is the unit, Ataru 1.
Investigators turn their attention to Ataru 1.
So that Ataru obviously became an important part of the puzzle because it was associated with so many faults.
Whatever caused that upset, it has something to do with this box. We need to collect every speck of data that ran through it.
Investigators need to find all the data they can on how Flight 72 was performing during its sudden upset. They turn to the flight data recorder, where hundreds of parameters are stored.
Look at this. I've never seen anything like it.
They spot something highly unusual.
These are wild angle of attack fluctuations coming from AOA 1.
Angle of attack, or AOA, is the angle of the plane's wing relative to airflow. The higher the angle, the less smooth the airflow over the wing.
And if the aircraft angle of attack gets too high, then the aircraft can stall. So it's a very important parameter.
From over 50 degrees nose up, back to level, then negative 50 degrees.
That's not what the pilots described at all.
Have a look for yourself. It's like the plane had a mind of its own.
Drummond knows that the crew described their plane pitching nose down twice. They never said it pitched up.
What do the elevator readings say?
10 degrees nose down.
He checks other FDR readings that record the plane's pitch. That data also confirms what the crew reported.
Show me the angle of attack again.
From the flight data recorder information, we could see that the elevators moved in a nose-down direction, about 10 degrees. There was an abrupt rate of change.
The plane did not pitch up. There's no way this AOA data is correct.
Investigators are convinced the bizarre angle of attack data must be faulty. It leads them to an intriguing question.
What would faulty data like this do to an A330?
I'm not sure, but I bet it's not good. Let's go ask Airbus.
Once we knew that the ADRU was outputting spurious data, we had to actually drill down even deeper and really understand what's going on.
So if the plane thought it was in a dangerous stall condition, the protections would kick in.
Meeting with an Airbus engineer, investigators learn about the A330's built-in failsafe measures. Known as protection modes, they prevent pilots from putting their planes into a dangerous attitude.
The protection modes are there to keep the aircraft in its flight envelope, regardless of what the pilot tries to do to exceed that flight envelope.
And then the computer would take over and command these two pitch downs. What would that look like if the plane wasn't pitched up?
Investigators discover that on the flight from Singapore, two protections that weren't needed kicked in at the same time.
Navire 1 fault.
That's not right.
It seems the computer thought the plane was pitching way up and was dangerously close to stalling.
What the hell is going on?
When the stall protection activated, the A330's computer commanded the first protection, push the nose down 4 degrees. At the same time, an anti-pitch-up protection commanded the nose down 6 degrees.
Together, that's 10 degrees. It's the same elevator movement as Flight 72.
It was established that erroneous angle of attack data had got into the aircraft flight control computers and triggered angle of attack protections that essentially caused the aircraft to pitch forward.
Establishing a link between faulty data and Flight 72's sudden upset is a step forward. But the mystery of what happened aboard Qantas Flight 72 is far from solved. The grim reality is that buried deep in the software of all A330s is an error that can trick the plane into making a sudden downward pitch. And now identifying the cause of the glitch
Hello.
has become even more urgent.
Okay, thank you. That was Qantas. Another A330 just had the same ADRU failure.
ATSB investigators gather information on another flight that suffered the same systems glitch as Qantas Flight 72.
Well, that's a relief. Thanks for letting us know. The pilots had heard about Flight 72. When their ADRU acted up, they shut down their computers immediately. No pitch downs.
Have a look at this.
When they search A330 flight records worldwide, they find yet another frightening incident.
We'd identified another event with the same ADRU a couple of years beforehand, which was very similar, with the ADRU providing all that nuisance information, nuisance alerts to the flight crew.
So this has happened 3 times already.
Having 3 events on these ADRUs was somewhat of a concern. To what extent could there be more events? How vulnerable potentially was this system?
There's got to be an explanation for this bad data.
Walker and his team are desperate to uncover the hidden flaw that's putting one of the world's most popular planes at risk. They dig deep into the digital code sent from the air data unit. They scan thousands of lines of code.
Oh, wait a minute.
Finally, they spot something.
That label's not right. That should be altitude.
When the ADRU passes data to other systems, it sends the data and attaches a label to each data message that's sent. A key turning point in this case was we were seeing data that was sent out as altitude data but being labelled as angle of attack data.
By improperly swapping the two types of data, the ADRU confused the plane's automated systems with catastrophic results.
Now you've got the ADRU sending data to other systems saying that angle of attack is actually 50 degrees and not whatever it really was. And those receiving systems were treating it as though it was valid data.
Investigators now understand why the plane's protection modes kicked in when they weren't needed. But they still don't understand what caused the data error in the first place. That's the big question now.
The ADRU has run through a battery of tests. We tested every input, every output, inspected every component, every subcomponent, right into the nitty-gritty of the data processing in order to figure out what was going on. No problems were encountered.
In their search for the answer, they wonder if environmental conditions on board the aircraft could have caused the unit to malfunction. They put it through a component stress test.
That looks snug. Let's boot it up.
All aircraft equipment is designed to withstand certain what's called environmental conditions, and they're things like temperature and vibration.
They boost the unit's internal temperature by wrapping it in a heat shroud.
We subjected the unit to a highly accelerated stress test where it was run under a high CPU load for a long period of time while under a heat shroud, and nothing happened.
The lab tests turn up nothing.
We can't find anything physically wrong with the unit that would explain what we saw, and that was a little frustrating.
With no evidence of any internal malfunction, investigators now question whether factors outside the aircraft could have been at play.
So this will beam common frequencies like radio transmissions, wireless signals?
Drummond and his team now consider the potential effects of electromagnetic radiation.
Electromagnetic radiation can come from a number of sources. It can come from external sources like radars or radio transmitters. We can eliminate all those together by doing the same kinds of testing. We irradiated the units with electromagnetic irradiation. It passed with flying colours.
It's another dead end. Investigators are at a loss.
What the hell is going on?
They still can't explain the frightening malfunction.
All right. Let's see where these instances occurred.
Investigators now wonder if some unknown factor on the ground could have caused the dangerous ADRU failure.
Geographically, they were all off the west coast of Australia, so that was something that we had to look at.
So these are the only places where this has ever happened?
We were quite interested if there was any common patterns.
Isn't it weird that all three events occurred off the coast of Australia?
Australian investigators continue their search for the cause of a mysterious and potentially deadly malfunction. One that injured 119 passengers and crew on board Qantas Flight 72.
The papers won't stop talking about this communication station.
What, this naval base outside Learmonth?
Yeah. Maybe that's what interfered with the plane.
We should run a test.
With news media speculating about a communications station near Learmonth, the team rolls out the biggest test yet. A full-scale flight test of the same Qantas A330 that suffered a near-fatal failure.
So we took that aircraft and we flew it in that area to see if there was any issues. There was equipment installed on that aircraft to measure the electromagnetic radiation environment in there.
Nothing yet. Wait a minute. Take out your cell phones. Turn them on, see if it has any effect.
And we turned all of our mobile phones on and we tried to make calls and all that sort of thing. We just wanted to see if any of the equipment would pick up on anything, and it didn't.
Nothing. Coast is coming up. Communications tower should be in range.
So the aircraft took the same flight path as the event aircraft, and not only did nothing happen, but it wasn't even measurable on the equipment.
All right. Let's go home.
It was a little bit frustrating, but we came to the end of the road in all the things that we could practically do.
While investigators don't know the root cause of the underlying failure, they understand the chain of events that led to the violent mid-air upset.
It all starts with bad data.
A mysterious malfunction in one of the plane's 3 air data units sends faulty data to other systems.
Prim 3 fault.
No.
Resolved.
No.
Navire 1 fault again.
What the hell is going on?
The pilots are inundated with warnings when their flight computer gets altitude data that's been improperly labeled as angle of attack data. The A330's automated protections kick in, commanding a 10-degree pitch down. Anything not strapped down in the cabin is instantly airborne. But thanks to the heroic flying of a former Top Gun pilot, the accident does not end in an all-out disaster.
The automation had failed us, had injured a third of the airplane, injured one of the pilots, but it's the human factor that worked through it.
Gear down.
And saved the day.
Flaps 3.
Kevin deserves Congressional Medal of Honor, you know. The guy is amazing. Kevin is the reason why we're sitting here today, to tell the story.
This was a black swan event, something that had never been seen before, something that no one had ever really expected would happen. And although we didn't actually find a full explanation, we found enough of an explanation to reduce the risk of this happening again.
The ATSB's investigation helped Airbus engineers make important software changes. Now, if the same error ever strikes again, it will not result in a violent pitch down.
The key thing to remember is the scenario that happened on QF-72 can't happen again. The flight control computer software changes.
As automation technology improves, we still can't guarantee that automation will be infallible. I feel that the hierarchy still needs to be pilot number 1, computer number 2.
For Fuzzy Maiava, the biggest lesson is an important safety reminder.
Buckle up, you know, it's simple. It's just common sense.